Blessed are the poor in spirit. Jesus begins his sermon with a profound blessing for those who are poor in spirit, an invitation to all of us who recognize that, regardless of wealth or status, we remain in need of God's support. This poverty of spirit isn't about material possessions. It's an awareness of our inner need, a humility that allows us to see our limitations and a genuine thirst for God's presence. For many of us, life is filled with pressures, stresses, and an underlying emptiness, no matter how much we achieve. This is the moment we begin to understand the poverty of spirit, a sense of vulnerability and dependence on God's mercy. In reality, spiritual poverty is the path to true peace. It's a call to stop relying on our own strength and to ask for God's guidance and protection. Imagine being able to lay down your burdens and open your heart fully to God, allowing Him to lead your every step. Jesus calls us to embrace a poverty of spirit, not to diminish our worth, but to receive strength from Him. Only by acknowledging our weakness can we find a lasting richness in God's love and presence. Blessed are those who mourn. When Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted," His words conveyed a message of profound comfort, especially for those who live in sorrow and despair. Facing loss and pain can make us feel isolated, as though we're sinking into an abyss with no way out. Yet, in these moments of seeming weakness, Jesus calls us to come to Him, for He alone can provide true healing and consolation to a broken heart. To mourn, as Jesus speaks of it, is more than expressing personal sorrow. It also encompasses grieving for the injustice and sin in this world. Jesus encourages us to carry a heart of compassion for those in suffering and to yearn for a world where righteousness prevails. Mourning over the brokenness around us is not a sign of weakness. It reflects the true sensitivity of a heart aligned with God's love and truth. Jesus desires that we understand that no matter how great our sorrow, no one suffers alone. He doesn't stand at a distance, observing us from afar. Jesus Himself experienced deep suffering and shed tears for humanity, fully understanding each tear we shed. Jesus wept at the death of His friend Lazarus, and He wept over Jerusalem, knowing the future calamity that would come. These moments show us that our pain is not overlooked. Every tear is seen by God, and He draws near to bring us comfort. To receive His comfort, we don't need to hide our emotions or pretend to be strong. Instead, we can allow ourselves to mourn, embracing our sadness and letting that brokenness draw us closer to God. He is the God of all comfort and the Father of mercies. In moments of despair, we can trust that He is beside us, gently wiping away each tear and filling the aching spaces in our hearts with His boundless love. We should remember that God is near to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. When we are overwhelmed by sorrow, let us find hope in His presence, knowing He alone can bring peace to our souls. Blessed are the meek. Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Meekness is a delicate virtue, often misunderstood in today's world. When people hear the word meek, they may mistakenly think it implies weakness or vulnerability. But meekness is, in fact, one of the greatest strengths a person can possess, as it requires self-control, patience, and a willingness to set aside personal desires for the sake of others. The meek are not weak. They have the strength to act and defend what matters, yet they choose to respond with gentleness, humility, and patience. Meekness involves surrendering pride and letting go of self-centeredness, so we may listen to and understand others, even when it may cost us. In a competitive world, meekness becomes a sign of inner resilience, the power to endure hostility without inflicting harm. Jesus embodied this meekness. He had the power to conquer His enemies, but He chose forgiveness and love instead. He calls us to live with meekness so that we may inherit the earth, not material wealth, but a life filled with God's peace and love. The meek are peacemakers. They seek harmony rather than conflict and do not need to assert superiority, for they recognize that what truly matters is the condition of the soul, not worldly power or wealth. The more we live in meekness, the more we experience the unbreakable strength of love and mercy, a strength that endures even through hardship and trials. Living with a meek heart draws us closer to God's own heart, bringing us not only his peace but also the promise of a deeper, everlasting inheritance in his kingdom. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. To hunger and thirst for righteousness is more than simply a desire for ordinary justice. It is a profound yearning for goodness, for justice, and for a better world. For those who have experienced injustice or witnessed undeserved suffering, this thirst for righteousness becomes an unquenchable fire, urging them to seek something greater than themselves. It is a state of the soul that refuses to be content with corruption, cowardice, or the injustices that prevail in this world. It is a silent but powerful call, pushing us to stand up for the values God has placed within each of us. For those who carry this longing, life is not a series of easy days, but rather a journey of seeking and contributing to righteousness. Such people often find themselves dissatisfied with what society currently offers, understanding that there is much in need of change. In the scriptures, Jesus emphasizes, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness," because this deep yearning leads us to God, the only one who can fill our spiritual emptiness and bring peace to our seeking souls. For those who carry this desire, God promises they shall be satisfied, not with material wealth but with inner peace and a hope that one day justice will truly reign. For many, the path of pursuing righteousness is far from easy. Those who seek righteousness often face misunderstanding, opposition, and even punishment for the ideals they uphold. This yearning can make them feel isolated in a society that seems to reward greed, selfishness, and a thirst for personal gain. Yet, it is in this solitude that we find ourselves closest to God. As Christ taught, those who endure for the sake of righteousness will be blessed, and true fulfillment will come when we wholeheartedly place our trust in God. To hunger and thirst for righteousness also calls us to be better individuals, constantly striving to improve ourselves and inspiring others. It is not only a personal desire but a social responsibility, urging us to stand for others and to engage in positive actions that benefit the community. This path may be arduous, but such sacrifice brings profound meaning. For as we yearn for goodness, we draw closer to God, experiencing a deep-seated joy that transcends the world and springs directly from God. Blessed are the merciful. Mercy is a sacred virtue, one that draws us closest to God. Mercy is more than empathy or feeling sorrow for others. It is an active effort to alleviate the suffering around us, regardless of who they are. In today's world, mercy is often undervalued, as society tends to prioritize success and power. Yet Jesus teaches us, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." Mercy is an invitation to open our hearts to others, to truly enter into their struggles and losses, allowing us to share and journey with them in their suffering. For those who are suffering, mercy is the helping hand extended in their hour of need, the comforting words in their darkest moments. When we live with mercy, we allow God to work through us, bringing healing to a wounded world. Mercy is not just an instruction from Jesus. It is a calling to live as he lived, to love and forgive even when faced with hardship. In the Bible, Jesus is always depicted as being close to the poor, the sick, the sinful, and the outcast. His mercy is not expressed through words alone, but through concrete actions, healing the sick, forgiving sinners, and offering hope to the hopeless. Mercy is not only a virtue, it is a calling for each of us to live within God's love and to share that love with others. Mercy is giving without expecting anything in return. It is tolerance and forgiveness, enabling us to see the world with the eyes of God. As we live with mercy, we find that we ourselves are recipients of mercy. God blesses those who love others, and his forgiveness is the greatest reward. Mercy is the pathway to true happiness, a happiness not based on material wealth, but on the peace in our souls when we know we have lived according to God's teachings. Blessed are the pure in heart. When Jesus speaks of a pure heart, he is not merely referring to moral cleanliness. He is pointing to a heart that is unencumbered by selfish motives, worldly desires, or pride. A pure heart is one that turns fully towards God, places him above all else, and is free from hidden agendas or intentions that would cloud one's love for him. This purity of heart reflects a soul as clear as glass, capable of mirroring God's love in every action, thought, and emotion. To be pure in heart doesn't mean we are free from mistakes. Rather, it signifies living in constant awareness, willing to correct ourselves and distance our lives from temptations that would draw us away from God. This purity arises from a heart that is not distracted by material ambitions, envy, or harmful intentions. When we guard our hearts in this way, we encounter a closeness to God that is only possible when we approach Him with a pure spirit. For it is through a purified heart that we can truly see God and His work in our lives. A person with a pure heart avoids malice, jealousy, and instead embodies forgiveness and compassion. This doesn't just bring peace to their soul, but also allows them to spread God's light to others. A pure heart allows us to live a life filled not only with faith, but also with empathy, love, and compassion in a world that often feels tumultuous and lost. While life may present many temptations and challenges that seek to stain our spirit, maintaining a pure heart is not only a challenge but a dedication, a commitment to live in God's will, not allowing the pain and disappointments of this world to dim His light within us. Blessed are the peacemakers. In a world overflowing with conflict, division, and discord, the mission of peacemaking is among the highest callings, and possibly the greatest challenge for those who follow Christ. Jesus doesn't call us to be mere lovers of peace. He invites us to become active peacemakers. This call requires us to step forward, bringing reconciliation to places of division, being the bridge where there is strife. To truly embody this calling, we must listen, empathize, and seek to understand the pain and perspectives of others, even when it challenges our own views. Peacemakers are those who sacrifice self-interest, restrain their ego, and open their hearts to those suffering from injustice. This work requires patience and dedication, driven by a thirst to see justice and harmony spread throughout the world. Sometimes the sacrifice of peacemakers is unseen, perhaps misunderstood, yet it reflects the heart of Christ, a heart that loves and forgives unconditionally. There is no greater promise than when Jesus says that peacemakers shall be called the children of God. This isn't only a promise but a profound recognition of the value of peace. To be called God's child is to carry out His mission of spreading love, uniting the broken, and making the world whole. In each act of peacemaking, we become living symbols of His presence and love on earth. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. The blessing for those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake is a strong affirmation that when we stand for truth and justice, we may face rejection, slander, or even oppression. Following the steps of Jesus, who endured suffering and was rejected by His own people, we too must be ready to accept hardship in the defense of justice, living steadfastly in our faith, even when it leads to misunderstanding or opposition from society. Those who endure persecution are not those who bear hardship without cause. They are the ones who rise for righteousness and truth, facing each trial with unwavering conviction. Persecution can stem from various sources: society, family, or even within ourselves, as we choose between personal safety and faith. Yet, in each difficult moment, God calls us to cling tightly to Him, for He has promised that those who remain steadfast shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. For the persecuted, suffering becomes a means of sanctification, a way to draw nearer to Christ and serve as a living testament of unwavering faith. When facing hardship, remember that Jesus endured and overcame the most severe persecution. He fully understands the pain we face and remains ever close to us. Our faith becomes the strength that helps us persist and uphold righteousness. God's promise is not merely a reward in the life to come. It is peace and joy in our soul because, in standing for righteousness, we truly feel His presence, even when all else around us seems to stand against us. Conclusion and application in life. As you meditate on the Beatitudes, remember that Jesus understands our suffering. He sees and loves those who are in pain, poverty, and loneliness. His word is a guiding light, a source of strength to lift us up. Pray, rely on Him, and live with the hope that we are not alone in this challenging world. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake is one of Jesus' most powerful teachings. When He spoke about persecution, He was not only referring to physical suffering or acts of injustice, but also the spiritual pain, the feeling of abandonment, of being misunderstood, and the trials that come when we live faithfully by His values. persecution is not foreign to us. It exists not only in extreme cases, such as the martyrs who face death for their faith, but also in the more ordinary circumstances of life. Those who choose to live according to Christ's teachings often face criticism, disdain, or even rejection for their different way of life. Some may speak up for justice, defend the vulnerable, and in turn suffer isolation, ridicule, or marginalization within their own communities or society. Jesus forewarned that following him would bring challenges, yet he also offered the incomparable comfort of his kingdom. To be persecuted for righteousness' sake is never an easy burden to bear. Jesus calls us to stand firm, not with violence or revenge, but with kindness, love, and unwavering faith in spiritual values. When someone is hurt, alone, or alienated for choosing what is right, they truly experience the heartache of being forsaken by those around them. They may endure feelings of misunderstanding, scorn, and even abandonment by loved ones, because they have chosen a path not everyone dares to walk. Jesus understood this difficulty well, for he too experienced persecution. On his way to Golgotha, he was deserted by many, scorned, beaten, and even crucified. Yet he did not respond with anger or resentment. Instead, he forgave those who caused him harm with his profound words, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do."
Luke 23:34.
This reminds us that persecution can be an opportunity to display love and mercy. We do not counter injustice with violence, but with forgiveness and patience, trusting that God will bring justice in his time. Choosing to live for justice and righteousness often goes against the grain of society. In a world that values power, material success, and personal gain, we are called to live differently. Upholding values and living righteously requires inner strength, especially knowing that what we do may not be accepted or respected. Jesus once said, "They will hate you, for they hated me first." John 15 verse 18. This does not mean we seek persecution, but when it comes, we can find meaning and purpose in this trial. Those who suffer persecution for the sake of justice often feel isolated and burdened. Yet, in that solitude, they may feel the presence of God more deeply than ever before. In these difficult moments, remember that Jesus promises us, "Theirs is the kingdom of heaven." This means that in every trial, God is alongside us, granting us strength and courage to endure. The kingdom of heaven is not merely a future reward, but also a present comfort, an inner strength that draws us close to him and sustains us with his boundless mercy. In the journey of enduring persecution, we may encounter others who share the same path, people who understand and empathize with us. These are the people God has sent to uplift and inspire us. In this connection, we may find comfort and motivation to continue living by the values Christ has taught us. Those persecuted are not alone. They are part of a resilient community of believers who are committed to living honestly according to their faith. The lives of those who endure persecution stand as living testimonies of love and trust in God. When faced with challenges, losses, and criticism, they choose not to give up. They find strength in the promises of Christ and trust that truth and justice will prevail. Their patience and faithfulness are sources of inspiration to all of us, embodying a powerful faith that faces all adversities without ever losing hope in God. Martin Luther King Jr. once famously said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." This emphasizes that the persecution we experience is not meaningless. It serves as a reminder that, in this challenging world, steadfastness in righteousness is a necessary part of a Christian's journey. Christ has blessed those who suffer for righteousness, for the hardships they endure contribute to the building of God's kingdom on earth. Every act of integrity, every time we stand for what is right, spreads the light of Christ into the darkness. Keeping faith during difficult times may be one of the greatest challenges, but it is also the time when God draws closest to us. In persecution, in endurance, in pain, we can sense his presence more clearly. Sometimes, in moments of apparent weakness, when we have nothing left but God, we become our strongest, because we know that God is our strength and our endless source of comfort. Persecution can be a long and painful journey, but it is also a journey that brings us closer to the heart of God. Through every step, no matter how difficult, God reminds us that He will never abandon us. His word is our light, our hope for those who persevere. And as we walk in that light, we find not only peace but the true meaning of life, a life lived for justice, truth, and love.